Hey there everyone, welcome to the Goway Pro Studio, which as you can see is actually our training area, which I have once again called for our interview today. And welcome to our Industry Insights with Goway series. Industry Insights with Goway is where you can hear and learn from the best in the industry. Pick up insider tips and tricks, follow the stories of proven and successful travel industry personnel, professionals, and all the while journeying into the exotic worlds of Goway. So today we are talking to Cara Mathews all about Antarctica. Now Cara will pass on why the great white continent still holds the sway of the modern day Globetrotter, as well as all the amazing vessels sailing around the waters, as well as all the amazing activities, experiences to be had both on land, on water, and even in the water. So welcome, Cara.
Thank you so much for having me, Don. This is great.
My pleasure. Now before we get going, I must point out that when I went to our reception today to tell our reception that Cara was joining us, and what we normally do is put up a sign when the person comes in, welcome whoever, to Goway. And I said to Sonia, our receptionist, Cara's coming in today. She said, that name rings a bell. And what it was this. This is our sign. And the last person to visit us before COVID was...
Oh, wow.
So there you go,
wow.
everyone. How's that for a bit of serendipity and
That's
coincidence?
Incredible. Full circle.
Yeah, full circle entirely.
Beautiful.
So as that suggests, it's been a long time since we've chatted to anyone really. Cara's actually, I think you're the first person literally in the building since we've come back. Wow. So there's another one for you. And it's also, coincidentally enough, just as COVID started, I with my son, I had 3 boys, middle one, he was with me, and my wife and youngest one, who we were just talking about, Hayden, yes. Were leaving from Canada to fly down to meet me to go on a Antarctica trip with Quark
March
Expeditions,
2020.
which Cara is from. Yes. And we were literally, I think, 2, maybe 3 days out before getting on the vessel, and we were told by the Canadian government to come on home, which we did. So I missed out on my second trip down to Antarctica. My family have missed out on their first, but we are going now in end of January next year.
Yes.
Finally getting there. So on that note, a little bit about me and my history with Antarctica. So Cara, let's hear a little bit about yourself, not only your involvement with Quark and Antarctica, which is what we're here to talk about, but just a little bit about yourself in general.
Yeah, thanks, Don. I have been actually with Quark Expeditions for 14 years now. Wow. It'll be 14 in the fall. And even though my father actually is a retired captain with an airline, I grew up traveling since I've been small. So the travel passion is in my bones, it's in my blood. But I'm actually a musician. So prior to Quark, I am a musician and a singer. So I thought, what a beautiful mix of music and travel. It's I feel a great balance and 2 of my passions. So prior to Quark, I was in the entertainment industry and still in the music scene for sure.
Yeah, I remember that because we spoke last time you were in the building about that, because I'm actually a bass player and been in bands.
Yes.
My life. So
yes.
There you go, another connection there with Cara. Okay then, so now, as most people may or may not be aware, Antarctica is a truly amazing part of the world. It's one of the still fewest visited destinations in the world, though more and more people are going. And there are some amazing experiences to be had, naturally going down to some place like Antarctica. So any experiences you had personally or from passengers that you can relate, be it the good, not the bad necessarily, but interesting, let's say.
Yes,
yeah.
That's a great point, because with Quark, we go to Antarctica at the end of October all the way to the beginning of April. And there is no bad time to go. But when I went for the first time, I went with my 66-year-old aunt, actually, my Aunt Lucy. And we went in February. And it was amazing because it's right in the heart of their summer in Antarctica, because we're going in the summer of the Antarctic region. And what I loved is the fact that I went with my aunt. We were on a small little ship. All of our ships are under 200 passengers, which is really important because we can actually get off the ship, walk on the continent, which is a real common question that I get asked. Did you walk on the continent? Did you walk amongst the penguins? And yes, we did. And what I loved is the fact that my aunt is a photographer. So she loved going with a photography group every once in a while, or going in the Zodiac. And I'm an avid hiker. I love hiking. Right. I grew up in British Columbia. I love the mountains. So there were days where one morning I would get up and go with our long hikers, and she would go with a contemplative group looking at different rock formations and ice formations. And then we'd come back on board and have lunch together. And I could see and hear her stories and some of her pictures, and then she could hear some of my stories. But then in the afternoon, after lunch, we'd get off the ship again and we'd jump in a Zodiac together and do a Zodiac cruise. And so what I loved so much is that I could still get what I needed out of my Antarctic trip. And she also got out of what she needed, but still having fantastic memories that have lasted a lifetime. We still talk about our trip at the bottom of the world together.
I think it's important to point that out too, particularly for Antarctica and the Arctic for that matter as well, and situations like the Galapagos Islands where it's group travel in that you are with other people.
Yes.
And what's the maximum group size on the vessel down in Antarctica?
Our largest ship has 199 passengers.
Right.
So some of them though are 128 and 174.
Right, so compared to traditional cruising, NCL, etc., these are very, very small vessels, okay?
Yes.
Now, even with those numbers of 120 to 190 and with a lot of people, I wouldn't say every individual is catered to in their likes and dislikes, but you have the options of doing different things on the vessel. So again, you can hike, you can take photographs, you can sea kayak, you can camp,
Yes.
which we'll touch on some of these in more detail later on.
Yeah.
So what are some of the wildlife experiences? Because my first trip down there, you know, I'm not going to steal your thunder, they got up close, or you can get up close and personal.
Yes.
On the assumption that the wildlife let you. It's not you doing it to them, it's them coming to you, correct?
That's exactly it. So there's so many wildlife guidelines that we have to respect in Antarctica for the protection of the species there. But typically we're going to the peninsula, that little finger of land that actually sticks up to South America. And the reason why we're going there is because it's the highest concentration of wildlife in Antarctica. So there's so many penguins. And to your point, we don't guarantee penguins, but you will see penguins. Everyone, all of your guests will see penguins. But what I loved is the fact that we are trying to stay 15 feet from the penguins, but they're so curious. And they have really on land no predators in terms of when they're adults. So they're so non-threatened by humans. So you can be standing there sitting on a rock, and to your point, the penguin will come right up to you. So one of my favorite experiences where I was just looking at a gorgeous glacier in the background in Port Lockroy, one of a landing site that we went to on one of my trips, and where I could actually mail a postcard because it's a British station and a mailing post office. So what I loved though is I was looking at this gorgeous glacier, sunny day, no wind, about 7 degrees Celsius, and I was standing there in awe. And all of a sudden, I didn't realize a penguin had approached me and stood right in front of me, looked up at me, and then looked down and kept walking right in between my legs.
Amazing.
And so that was a magical moment. So to your point, Don, there's penguins everywhere. So we typically see on one of my trips, I saw about 5 penguin species in Antarctica.
Right.
But what I want to stress is there are penguins that I haven't seen, like the king penguin, which can only be found, for instance, in areas of South Georgia that can't be seen on Antarctica.
Is that the same with the emperor, only in one area for the emperor penguins?
Exactly. In terms of the emperor penguin, the tallest penguin species of the 17 species in the world, the emperor penguin we're actually going to see in November of 2023 again in a colony called Snow Hill.
And that's in the WEDDELL Sea?
Is exactly in the WEDDELL Sea. I love your polar knowledge. Yay. And so yes, the WEDDELL Sea is typically on the eastern portion of the peninsula. And so this island called Snow Hill Island is on that portion of the WEDDELL Sea. And you actually need helicopters, which we have on our new Ultramarine, which we can talk about later on. But what happens is there's a beautiful emperor penguin colony, and it's on the island of Snow Hill. And so we need the helicopters to actually take guests from the ship, and we land the helicopters approximately a mile outside of the rookery. So we're not scaring the wildlife at all. The point of our helicopters that we've had for 30 years being in the business has not been to chase the wildlife or to scare the wildlife at all. We're very mindful of that. But what happens with Snow Hill is we're actually landing the helicopters about a mile out of the rookery, and then we're walking quietly and mindfully into the rookery so we can observe the emperor penguins. So it's a very special trip that we haven't done in quite a few years. And we're bringing it back for 2023 November.
Wonderful.
So great. I'm glad that you brought up the emperor penguin, one of my favorites. But I haven't seen one yet in a colony. I'd seen one. We got woken up about 3 a.m. by our expedition team leader. We got asked to gently come out on the deck of the ship because there was one little lonely emperor penguin out on an ice floe. So I have seen emperor penguins
From
with
afar.
Quark expeditions from afar.
Another thing I want to point out, which is something Cara mentioned before, is where most vessels visit is the tip that comes up. Now, it's important to know that Antarctica is, you know, it's actually a desert. That's one thing, a little unknown fact, it's a
Love
desert.
it.
So probably 80% of all trips to Antarctica come from the southern part of South America to that particular tip.
Yeah.
Correct. And most of the itineraries are somewhat short. Again, we'll expand on itineraries in a minute, but are somewhat 10 to 12 days to the tip. But when we talk Antarctica, it also includes the Falklands,
Yes.
South Georgia, and again the Weddell Sea. There are options to go to Antarctica from Australia, but it doesn't offer the same in depth of wildlife exposure as the area that we visit on the way down. Okay, so you mentioned the Ultramarine, which is a newer vessel.
Yes.
So
A brand new ship.
Brand new
which I'm very
ship.
excited about.
So when a client is looking to visit Antarctica, like the Galapagos, the ship is not key, but it's important to a decision because you spend a reasonable amount of time, particularly getting to and from Antarctica due to the distances.
Yeah.
When you're, well, I'm sort of segueing a bit here already. When you're in country, so to speak, in continent, there's what, 14, 15 hours of daylight?
Approximately, depending on what month you're going in. But
Yep.
yes, there's quite a lot of daylight. You're absolutely right.
Which in turn means you can spend, again, by choice, and you'd be crazy not to, but spend a lot of time off the vessel. So vessels are important for a whole lot of safety reasons, which won't go into detail, but just know that all the vessels in the waters are fully ice rated. They're perfectly fine and safe to travel in those conditions. But more importantly is the appointments on board. And they range from, I wouldn't say the basic, but let's say 4-star up to now for Antarctica. We're looking at like, I don't want, dare I say 6-star, but very, very luxurious expedition. Again, not cruise ships, expedition cruise ships. So if a client's looking to go, what should they look for in a vessel outside the safety reasons, which we know are covered?
Yes.
From appointments, and why should they go, say, from a 4 to maybe the Ultramarine?
Yes, that's a great point because we have 4 ships in our fleet that go to Antarctica. So we have ships ranging, like I mentioned earlier, 128 passengers all the way up to 199 for the Ultramarine. And what I love about the variety is we talked about experiences. There's a little something for everyone in Antarctica. But we also have a ship fleet that there's a little something for everyone. So with our brand new Ultramarine, it's very luxurious with penthouse suites and deluxe balcony suites and great explorer suites with no balconies but very spacious. So there's a beautiful cabins. There's a gorgeous spa too, great bistros and phenomenal cuisine on all of our vessels. But with the Ultramarine is there's 2 helicopters. And so there's 2 helipads on this vessel. And what that, in addition to our Zodiac launching platforms, we can get everyone off the ship even faster with this vessel and go further and farther into these destinations, not only with 2 helicopters, but with our Zodiac deployment system. So the Ultramarine is beautiful because it's not only luxurious, but it meets a lot of expedition needs built specifically for the polar regions and getting off the ship.
And it's also worth pointing out too that there is no, it's changed recently, there's no official body, well there is an official body, but it's something that all the operators who sail Antarctica have come together to promote and be responsible with the ships and how they're operated in the area. So there is as little impact on the environment as possible. Is that correct?
That is correct. There's a board called IATO, and you're absolutely right. It's what's fantastic is all of these suppliers that are traveling and bringing guests to Antarctica. We want to have regenerative, sustainable tourism in these regions. We want to make sure that if a landing site has been used so many times throughout a season, that maybe it's closed for a specific period of time, knowing that it's been overtrodden with a lot of guests. But with Antarctica, only 100 guests can land on the peninsula at one time or on a particular landing site, and so with these rules and regulations, really protecting Antarctica and the wildlife there, because even with our ships that are 174 and 199 passengers, we have so many off-ship activities that's how we can get everyone off the ship at the same time. So people are on landings, maybe they're exploring, going on a hike or a contemplative walk, seeing a penguin rookery. But then we have, you mentioned kayaking earlier. So we have great sea kayaking programs. So we have about 16 to 12 passengers, small groups doing kayaking. Then we have stand-up paddleboarding. So we have a group of 10 guests doing stand-up paddleboarding. The fact that we're getting everyone off and doing different things.
Different things, yeah.
So the very point of the ship itself is to get off the vessel.
Right.
It's this beautiful creature comforts, great home base, but the whole point is to get off as much as possible and into the destination.
Right. Which is basically summarizes going to Antarctica. It's not to spend time on the vessel.
Yeah.
It's to get off. When you just basically segued into my next question of all the beautiful luxuries on board. There are so many things to do off board. Now, you touched on kayaking, which needs to be pre-booked.
Yes.
And there's a cost to that.
Yes.
There is stand-up boarding, paddle boarding.
Yes.
Is that a pre-booked situation as well?
I would highly recommend pre-booking it when someone's even holding a cabin. So stand-up paddle boarding is an additional $295 US per guest. And why that is because we supply all the equipment, but we also have a guide, a very experienced guide, part of our expedition team, that is actually leading the stand-up paddleboarding program, for instance. And then we have a paddling program, which isn't as intense as the sea kayaking program. So if someone's a very experienced paddler, they might want to do our sea kayaking program where someone has their designated kayak. It's their kayak for the duration of the trip. They can go out as many times as possible that our sea kayaking guide is guiding everyone in these areas. But then we have our paddling program that's an inflatable kayak.
Oh, cool.
So if someone has no experience kayaking or very little kayaking experience, or maybe they only want to go once throughout their whole voyage, it's again $295 per guest, and it's an inflatable kayak that fits. It's a tandem kayak, so two people. It's a double kayak, and it's very stable, very sturdy, but it gives someone enough of an opportunity to have that quiet, that solitude in the polar regions.
So for our trip, we have booked the kayaking because my family does a lot of backcountry camping and canoeing.
Great.
And the point there of the solitude when you go out or just going into a campsite or during the day or at night time, just going out and floating in the canoe is amazing. So I cannot wait to do the similar thing in Antarctica. Now, again, while 100 odd people, they're all split up and go in different spots.
Yep.
To get off, to me personally, to get off in a kayak and just go off somewhere on my own or with a small group of people in silence will be amazing. Now, you can also camp in Antarctica, is that correct?
On selected voyages, camping is available. So with the camping opportunity, people can sign up again in advance, highly recommend, because it does sell out quite quickly. So on selected voyages, we have people that are participating in the camping. Again, we supply all the equipment. Everyone has dinner on board because we don't bring food on the landing site. And then we go out after dinner. People can set up their own tents or their own bivouac sacks. We had a couple that were celebrating their 25th wedding anniversary camping on the Antarctic landing site. And they said after 25 years of marriage, putting up a tent in Antarctica was definitely high on their list of team building exercise.
Oh, there you go.
And they loved it. And so it's typically smaller groups. And so not everyone on the ship can actually sign up and participate. And so it's one night, and then we come back before breakfast, and everyone comes back on board and has breakfast. And you bring up light earlier in terms of sunshine and daylight. And a lot of photographers love the camping option as well, because seeing the sunlight with the sunrise very early in the morning in the twilights is gorgeous photos.
Wonderful. So that also leads to the question that you would be asked, or we get asked, but if I can camp, how cold is it during the day, but particularly at night?
Yeah, it varies. The average temperature in Antarctica, because we're going in the heart of their summer, is there were about -5 to about +5 degrees Celsius, I would say, on average.
So what's that Fahrenheit for our American
so about
viewers?
45 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit,
Right.
I would say, in there, that range. And so what I specifically say is it's kind of like going, again, you mentioned outback camping and hiking. It's like preparing for any mountain range. If I was hiking in Banff or areas, let's say I loved hiking in Boulder, Colorado one summer, I still packed some lightweight gear, or I would layer up. So I would have my thermal underwear on, maybe a fleece sweater, and then with Quark Expeditions, we provide all of our guests with a parka, and it's theirs to keep. It's water resistant, waterproof. But it can be so warm in Antarctica that there were some landings when the sun's shining, because again, it's the heart of their summer, it was 10 degrees Celsius. And I tied my parka around my waist because I was going for a lovely walk and a contemplative meandering excursion with one of our guides. And so it actually is shocking. People say, why would I want to go to Antarctica? It's so cold. And it's a preconceived notion for
Exactly,
going in
and
the
that's
summer.
something I learned years ago when I started getting involved with it, that I think I threw up on my presentations. The average temperature is 3 to 4 degrees
Yeah.
during the day. And it's, yeah, people find that surprising, but it is, even though it's so far south, or south as you can go, almost, it is summertime. Remembering that Antarctica naturally is in the south, so our North American audience here, our winter,
Yeah.
their summer, and that's the time that you travel, as Cara mentioned earlier on. So I know we have a cruise, a Patagonia cruise, which runs through the fjords of southern Chile and southern Argentina, and they land at Cape Horn.
Yes.
Now, I know the answer, but I'll ask it anyway. With the Antarctica cruises, you round the Horn, but you don't, there's no option to land on the Horn, correct?
I'm so glad that you're bringing this up because we have brand new itineraries that just came out. They're 13-day Antarctic Explorer departures that include the Cape Horn, and they include Diego Ramirez. And so these are beautiful islands. The Diego Ramirez is an island that we'll also try and stop to, weather dependent, of course. But after a full Antarctic departure, coming back across the infamous Drake Passage, and then we'll stop on these particular itineraries on Cape Horn. So again, with the Ultramarine, this is an itinerary we were able to create because of the Ultramarine. So we'll try and use the helicopters to make the landings in Cape Horn. But of course, weather permitting, we'll also have the Zodiacs. So we'll have the Zodiacs as also a mode of transportation. And so it's beautiful because, to your point, with rounding Cape Horn, that's just as significant in history as landing on Cape Horn. I believe we talked about how few tourists go to Antarctica and explore Antarctica, but even fewer go to Cape Horn.
Yes.
Very special. So I'm glad that you mentioned an itinerary that you have cruising the fjords in the areas of Cape Horn. Because what I really find fascinating is for about a span of 200 years, there were 10,000 sailors that perished.
On that note, it's worth bringing up, because something I bring up in my presentations based on the Horn, due to its severity or with weather. And again, everything Cara's mentioned about landing on the Horn, it is, and same with the fjords cruises, all weather dependent, because Cape Horn is notoriously bad with weather. As we have the Atlantic and the Pacific meeting, as well as the Antarctic Ocean all crushing together. And a little fact I like to bring up actually is when Captain Bligh, on the trip he left, which ended up being the mutiny trip, Mutiny on the Bounty, he attempted to circumnavigate the world, and by doing that you had to come down the coast of South America, round the Horn, into the Pacific.
200 years ago, two friends set out on an impossible voyage.
Tahiti. Fletcher, I want you to sail with me again.
They made a journey through hell and arrived at this perfect place, only to become mortal enemies. Their names were Fletcher Christian and William Bligh. Their ship was the Bounty.
Squared away!
Bligh tried for 6 weeks to round the Horn.
Oh my God.
And the weather, again, sailing, the era of sailing, the weather just kept pushing him back, and he eventually gave up and went the other way across the Indian Ocean into the Pacific, because he couldn't round the Horn because of because of the severity of the weather. So that's really good news that you can now, on select departures, land at Cape Horn, weather permitting, as always. Okay.
As always.
So you mentioned too, when we were talking about the temperature in Antarctica, when you were trekking, say in Boulder, you mentioned that you would layer up. So a big question we all get is what to pack. Now, again, a key thing, as Cara briefly mentioned, is with the trips to Antarctica, you get included a polar jacket, which is yours to keep. So when you sign up for your trip, you'll ask for your size, etc. That's waiting for you in your cabin when you arrive, I understand?
Yes, correct.
And you bring that home with you. So you don't need to pack that. You've got to bring it home, but you don't need to pack it going down. But for other packing considerations, without going into a full list, what are the sort of key things that someone should be aware of?
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned this because my personal experience, people overpack for the polar regions. They pack way too much because they think it's so cold. But I really feel like your base layer of your long johns, your thermal underwear for pants, and then some people wear sweatpants, but I like that thermal layer, and then a waterproof pant over top. So packing for sure, some sort of waterproof pant, whether it's a ski pant or a sailing pant or a rain pant, and that goes over also a muck boot that we provide. So that also is provided as a great muck boot that's waterproof and durable and really warm. And so what I also, with the Long Johns, with the thermal long underwear, I highly recommend, again, the thermal underwear base layer on top as well. So something long sleeve, keeping the core layer, the body warm, and then a fleece over top. So that fleece can be removed on a landing or even be worn on board. It can be used for both. And then we have our parka that comes with a removable liner. So a lot of passengers are actually wearing the removable liner out on deck, spotting wildlife. And so that's a great option too. I highly recommend 2 pairs of gloves. And I'll tell you why. I was in a Zodiac coming back from a landing site and going back to the ship, and I was holding on to the ropes of the Zodiac, and the winds picked up. So it was very windy, which created a lot of swells coming back to the board, which I loved. I was so happy. But I was holding on to the ropes, and a big wave splashed over me, and my gloves got soaking wet. And I didn't have waterproof Gore-Tex gloves. So what I did was I had another pair of gloves that were dry in my cabin. So I was able to switch those out for the afternoon because they wouldn't have dried in time. So I highly recommend 2 pairs of warm gloves, in addition to a thin layer of gloves. So sometimes when it's a bit chillier in the evenings, or maybe on a particular landing site if it's a bit windy, I really like a thin pair of gloves because you can use your camera. So something that you can wear that's a thin glove. So those are my main things that I like to pack. And sunglasses, because it's sunny, or even on cloudy days, the reflection off the ice and the water. Yes. And then one other thing that I think is essential is something to cover the ears. So I call them a toque, but a hat, nice warm hat. Sometimes we can take it off in the landing. I put it in my pocket. But more often than not, for the Zodiac cruises, the wind picks up, and it's nice to have something warm to cover the ears.
So I think another key thing through Cara's description there of what to pack is wind resistant or windproof even clothing, because generally it's mild and it's nice weather, but if the wind picks up, it's like anywhere, particularly if you live in the northern climes here of North America and Canada, it's the wind that's the cold bit versus the actual temperature.
That's exactly it, the wind chill factor.
Okay, so we touched on before, Antarctica is the peninsula that comes up, touches or comes close to touching the bottom of Argentina. South Georgia, the Falklands, the Orkneys as well. Orkneys,
Yep, the Orkney Islands.
Sorry.
I
was flying up to the Arctic there by mistake. Is the region that's generalized by Antarctica when it comes to itineraries. So the most popular, as we mentioned, is the one that goes down to the tip of the peninsula, correct?
Yes.
So they run from 10 to 14 days, is that right?
Yeah, that's about right. So it's called our Antarctic Explorer itinerary, and it is exactly that. Our most popular one is 11 days. That's the most, I feel like that's the sweet spot for people still seeing areas of South America. So 11 days still enables every guest to experience about 5 days on the continent, because it typically takes a day and a half to 2 days in each direction to sail to Antarctica.
And that's whether the Drake Passage is playing nice and called the Drake Lake, or it's doing what you'll see on YouTube videos, throwing monstrous waves at you. And that's all part of the fun. Maybe
the Drake Shake and the Drake Lake. I love it.
The Drake Lake, Drake Shake, Drake Lake. It's maybe not so much fun if you suffer from seasickness.
Yeah, you can see on both our bridge wings, there are also
So that segues nicely into the fly cruise option, Cara.
Yes, we can go to Antarctica for as little as 8 days with our fly cruise program. So it's called Antarctic Express. And what I love is that we pick everyone up from the airport in Punta Arenas on day 1, take them to an included night hotel. And then on day 2, we're actually flying across the Drake Passage on a very safe jet. And we're landing in Antarctica. We're landing on a little island called King George Island. It's actually a military base. It's a Chilean military base. But the ship's waiting empty. So we have our luxurious World Explorer, for instance, that's waiting there. And passengers can embark, have a full Antarctic experience, 4 to 5 days on the continent, before flying back on day 7. Another included hotel night in Punta Arenas. And then on day 8, people can explore other areas of Punta Arenas, or maybe go on and see Easter Island, Atacama Desert.
So it's worth pointing out that the fly cruise operates from Punta Arenas in Chile, not from Ushuaia.
Correct.
The vessels that leave from Ushuaia are literally sailing to and from the Drake Passage. The fly cruise option is from Punta Arenas, Chile, which again, as Cara's mentioned, you avoid the Drake crossing, which is 2 or 3 days in itinerary savings. You avoid the seasickness, and you get the claim of flying to Antarctica, which is quite cool. Also, if someone wants to visit Antarctica literally for a day, you can do that. So the person joins the flight that goes down to meet the cruise. They hop off, spend the afternoon wandering around King George Island, and then fly back, or overnight and then pick up the plane the next day. So there is a fly to Antarctica option for 1 day or 2 days with an overnight. Now the overnight is in the military, or not the military compound, but it's a very basic hut type thing. So it's nothing, it's luxurious, but again, someone can literally fly to Antarctica for a day or 2 days. So that wraps up, I think, most of the key points. Anything else you'd like to add about Antarctica, or anything else for that matter?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention with the fly program, a lot of people think, and they might say, can I cruise one way and fly another? And actually, we're not doing that itinerary anymore. So you do fly both ways. Because some people want to experience the Drake Passage one way, have that badge of honor and fly back. But it's very similar to in terms of cost, and we just found that it wasn't as popular. So people really wanted to fly both ways. And I just wanted to really emphasize the fact that there is no bad time to go to Antarctica, whether someone's going in November or whether someone's going in March or January. There's just simply different things to see. It's all spectacular.
Just back to the fly cruise. Do you offer the fly cruise on the first and last of the season on the repositioning?
No, we offer it only from typically December to March in the heart of the Antarctic summer, and we only do flying both ways.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, great question.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Really appreciate Cara's time, and it's great to welcome Cara back again.
This is great. This is some of my favorite things to talk about.
Yeah, last guest in, first guest back. So it's really good that we're hitting some normality once again. If you have any questions about Antarctica, please give one of the Goway destination specialists a call. Again, as a reminder, all our destination specialists work in a particular area. For Antarctica, it includes Latin America for the reasons I just mentioned, in that, you know, it comes out of Ushuaia or Punta Arenas in Chile or Argentina, hence it's in the Latin America world. Our experts are exactly that, experts on the region, the destination, all the pre and post options, and of course we work with one of the best experts in the industry for Antarctica and the Arctic.
Yes.
Remember that we've talked Antarctica today. Our winter, Northern Hemisphere winter, Southern Hemisphere summer, and then the flip side of that, when it's our summer here and winter down in Antarctica, no one goes to Antarctica. Even the penguins hunker down. But the vessels all move north to the Arctic and then start exploring that region as well. And that's an interview for another time. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. We hope you found this informative, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much, Cara.
Thank you for having me, Don. This was great.
Bye everyone.